quickly reviewing the agenda before we go in. Opportunity for public comment. Sorry? Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's been a long week, and yes, I'm aware it's only Wednesday. All right, this being a hybrid meeting, we do have to do a roll call attendance vote to call the meeting to order. So starting on Zoom, I see Ed.
Here.
Joe.
Here.
Emily.
Present.
Jeffrey.
Here.
Mark.
Here.
John.
Here.
Marianne.
Here.
And Joe here.
Mr. Chair, can I just remind people for these, this is amplified sound in the room, so if you're speaking, just turn them on, the green light's on, and then you can be amplified. So.
Ooh, all right, okay. Sounds good. And that's separate from...
It helps with the Zoom as well.
It helps with the Zoom. All right, that's good to know.
It helps in the room and with the Zoom. So.
All right, I have tried turning on the microphone in front of me. It sounds like people in the Zoom could hear me, but
okay.
Every little bit helps. All right. So yes, so we have a couple different discussions about topics that have the word policy in them. A discussion of policies and practices for projects that come in under budget, which follows up on an earlier meeting. And another follow-up action on a previous meeting, a discussion of looking at a comprehensive financial policy review for the town. And then we'll talk about future agendas, in particular the financial forum, and we have some minutes. So with that, I believe we'll move to public comment. I see folks in the room. If you're on Zoom, go ahead and raise your hand. I am connected to Zoom, so I should see you, but go ahead. Yes.
Nancy. Now it's on. Nancy Doctor, Pearl Street, Precinct 1 meeting member. Thank you very much for the agenda item of projects coming in under budget. My concern was the school committee use of funds that were not approved for town meeting, that I believe I had expressed some of that to the chair previously. And it concerns me because it's not the first time this has happened. As I pointed out, town meeting approved funding to renovate the police department, specifically to move the health department there, and that never happened. And there was no explanation to the public or town meeting on that money. I believe that was roughly $200,000. It's an issue I cannot bring up in town meeting because it's money already spent. Our former town manager basically said, well, they found the space after all. I think that's unacceptable use of taxpayer money. And so I'm really interested in this agenda item. I, as a town meeting member, am very dependent on FinCom's direction. And frankly, it's very unsettling to me when I look at next year's budget, knowing the constraints, how I'm going to trust any numbers going forward when I really don't know what is happening to taxpayer money and the accountability. Thank you.
Other comments? I see Angela, I see Chris as well. Angela, go ahead.
Angela.
Angela Benda, town meeting member. Just like to stay for the record, I'm not a horrible person. I also want to speak about the $300,000 above the bid that came in and it being spent at on items over at the field house. I went back, I watched town meeting. It was on, there was 2 requests at town meeting. I watched town meeting again on YouTube. I looked at the warrant reports. There was nothing that was said about a project. It was about these 2 items. I spoke at school committee. I was very fortunate that I asked to meet with Dr. Milczewski and our town manager, and I met with them both, not at the same time. I met with Dr. Milczewski and the facilities manager, Joe Huggins. And I think it was a very good conversation. They heard me, I think I heard them, and we sort of agreed to disagree. A few of the things that concerned me was that it was never presented as a project, so I don't believe that it was just, well, we didn't we didn't explain it well because there were conversation at town meeting went on for well over an hour, probably closer to 2 hours over the 2 nights that it went to 2 different town meetings. There was no presentation about that. It was all presented as safety for the students. So I am concerned, $300,000, like I said to the school committee, when things come under budget, we're so used to Ms. Wellman and Ms. Engstrom presenting it back and saying, yay, it came in under budget. And we're like, yay, what can we do with this money now? And that is what our expectation is as town meeting members. So I actually asked Dr. Milichevsky, I said, I got a tour of the field house and saw the work that was done, and nobody's going to say that it wasn't great, but it wasn't approved by town meeting. And so I think that I said that, okay, it was $300,000. You can maybe make a case for $200,000 if you want to make that case. I said, I think $100,000 should be given back to the town side from the school budget. I don't think scoreboards should be paid for by the town out of that money. So I do hope that something happens where some money gets paid back, especially for the scoreboards. But I'm very happy that FinCom is working on this. I don't know I didn't look at your packet. I don't know what you're proposing, but I do think that there should be something that says, what happens if money goes over and what is considered a project as opposed to an item, and how that's determined. So thank you for taking this up, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with.
Thank you. Chris?
Thanks, Joe. Chris Haley, 71 Tennyson Road, speaking for myself as always. I just want to remind this committee, as well as everybody else, the specifics of the town meeting vote that was originally voted on back in November. And it's, quote, town meeting approved Article 15 to see if the town would vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, transfer from available funds, or otherwise provide a sum or sums of money for the purposes of making improvements, including full replacement of the floor at the Reading Memorial High School field house. In my opinion, the improvements that were made, other than the scoreboard, fall well within the purview of what was done. I would love to see money coming back to us, but unfortunately what would happen with this is the money would come back to us, sit in an account for a decade, like the library and everything else that just got sprung upon us, and then we never do anything about it. I'm glad to see that Joe Huggins took the initiative, ran the project as the project manager, saved this town $150,000, and was able to protect the flooring, the bleachers, painting over there, because you can't go ahead and paint after the bleachers are there, and you have to take the bleachers off the wall. It makes no sense. So I'm glad that he did that. I hope in the future that he continues to want to step up and be the project manager to save this town money, because I would hate for things to dissuade him in the future. Because in my opinion, certain things have dissuaded me from doing things in the future as well. And I don't like to let things like that get to me, especially when it's $150,000. And the last point that I wanted to make was that the school committee consistently has turned back money over to the town year over year. They don't want to do it, but they still do it. I think last year was 200-something thousand, or maybe 60. I'm probably way off. All I know is they consistently turn money back to this town, and they shouldn't, but they still do it because it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Any other public comment? I don't see any hands on Zoom. So with that, let's move on to liaison reports. You don't want to go first? Marianne?
Yeah, I was just double checking the select board agenda because I'm still the liaison for there. There's a lot going on. So please correct me. It was a long meeting that I tried to watch if I got anything. So the important thing is, I believe they approved the town meeting warrant, including adding a snow shoveling bylaw, which presented an issue because 3 select board members kind of had to recuse themselves from the discussion and then go back in because they all own property in the affected area. But for the members of the public, I know it's not really FinCom, but there is a meeting next Tuesday on the snow shoveling bylaw. The bylaw committee is running, and you can find out about it on the town page. So in case people want to know more about that. They called it an override discussion with money on talking about valet parking to get using that as a way to make money, but there was some police concern about taking public spots, and I think ultimately the outcome was that that idea was not moving forward out of that meeting, if I have that correctly. They discussed the trash contract with the selected vendor. I think it's about $2 million. I'm sure Jane could update us all much more on that, but I don't believe the select board took a vote, and the vote's going to be the next meeting. There was a mention that they're going to be getting, I think, $80,000 from the opium settlement, approximately.
85 over a certain amount of years, and there's a second settlement, and that's going to be 16,000 as well.
Okay, so they voted, to accept that. Please tell me I got this right. They voted yes to give a 3-month contract extension to RCTV.
They did.
After much debate. I believe it was unresolved to appoint a rep for Recal and Burbank to, I think it was a 2-2 vote on who the rep is going to be. And I don't believe that they voted on a rep, so that will be coming. I think that is most of the updates. There was some discussion about, it never really came before us, but it would have been money towards being paid to Matera for the Mulberry Forest preschool. Ultimately, they're going to locate at Camp Rice Moody. And hopefully it'll be just during the day so the Girl Scouts can still have it after school, but that's not our town's purview. But in any event, Matera still needs some repairs, so they couldn't have anyone in there. And I think that's everything. There's probably more, but that was the highlights that would concern us.
Thank you. Other liaison reports? John?
Just a couple of quick new growth items from CPDC. They approved the mixed-use development on south of the square on Main Street at the Realty Place for, I believe, 12 housing units and 2,100 square feet of commercial. And they've closed their hearing on the Primrose School, which is the preschool on Main Street. They have not voted yet. That's coming up.
Thank you. So I see you, Karen. We're doing liaison reports. So, Emily, please, on Zoom.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I attended the Council on Aging meeting a couple of weeks ago, and just one minor financial note, they started talking about the ARPA funds running out on some of the programming that they've been using them for. So they were talking about strategies to kind of alert residents that, more programs will have kind of participation fees associated with them. So I think their plan is to update through their Pleasantries newsletter so that people kind of see that coming on the horizon. And then attended the Recreation Committee meeting for 2 reasons, one for this and the other to present the operational plan for Recal, or the plan to develop an operational plan for Recal. And Jenna mentioned that they've been working with a contractor to get some initial projections of what the operational cost might be for the center. They don't have the numbers in hand yet. They're still going through it internally. But they're working hard to try to understand what the projected revenues, for the programming will be and what the operational costs will be once the building's in place. And there was more mention, I mentioned at our last meeting, there was some conversation within town staff about some funding coming from kind of recreation funds to work on some conservation projects, and they brought it up again at the meeting Still some concerns from the rec committee members about, there are certain recreation programs that they've been unable to fund, and they're just concerned that, if there aren't clear guideposts put up, there might be at risk of losing more programming if some of their funds get diverted elsewhere. So more conversations on that, but that was kind of it in the financial realm.
Thank you. I see Ed.
Thanks, Joe. Just a quick one from the Killam School Building Committee. We had a meeting within the last couple of weeks. Not much on the financial side that, as far as impacts, other than we're continuing to be, kind of on budget and on time. Other highlight is that, some site work is going to start happening, kind of soon at the location, and we're going to have some, continuing outreach to both neighbors and Killam parents, and the wider community, not just for Killam, but over the next few weeks and months. So that's about it. But again, don't want to bury the lead. But as far as the project team, both the OPM and the design team just are stellar, and really can't kind of say enough good things about them. And as we go along so far, it's been really excellent.
Thanks. I see you, Joe, but Jeffrey raised his hand same time as Ed, so we'll go to Jeffrey next.
So for the school committee, which met last Thursday, a couple of items. There was a special focus on the award that the school meals department received for their summer meals program. To follow up on something Chris was saying, $60,000 will be returned to the general fund from last fiscal year, in addition to $225,000 that they're placing in the special education reserve fund to be used if something comes up in the future. And following up on the modest preschool that was going to go in the Terra Cabin, the school committee had some reservations and some discrepancies in the testimony that was provided when that group came. And the chair mentioned that he had requested further information and had nothing in 2 weeks. So he was a little concerned. They kind of obviously go ahead and operate as a pre-K, but without school committee approval, they cannot be considered as a valid school day. So presumably, unless they figure something out with homeschooling, they would be, any students in older grades would be essentially truant if they're not at an approved school. So they're hoping to.
Jeff, I checked their website. I'm sorry.
I checked their website, and right now they are just saying that for anyone enrolled who's aged 6 to 12, the parents have to call themselves a homeschool, and they're putting down, well, we're waiting for DESE accreditation, but DESE doesn't accredit. DESE leaves it to the school committee. So they'll just have to work. I think the school committee wanted them to get training, get that locked up. So they'll just have to operate ad hoc. But I think even though it's not money for the town, I think it's just better that they're at this other facility. I'm familiar with both facilities. I think Rice Moody's better for a school anyway. It's much bigger and often on a busy road, Yeah.
Okay, so that was school committee report.
Cool. Thanks, Jeffrey. Joe.
Yeah, I don't have any updates, but just going back to the opioids settlement, that $85K, like Marianne or anyone, where will that money go? Like which account or that?
What I heard them say, and Matt can correct me, is they were going to give it to the coalition to work on prevention efforts or outreach. So I think they were going to pour it right back into the intended purpose. We can do anything with it, but I think it's such a small amount, right? Matt, you can elaborate.
It's certainly needed, and that's where it's intended to go. So.
Great. Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
Go ahead, Andrew.
I have a quick update on RMLD. I attended their last session. They have now appointed another interim director, and they went into executive session to discuss about salary and pay. Also, they heard an update from E&E on the benefits of being part of E&E New England. And also they had a few pretty large items for capital purchases. I think 2 bucket trucks. The total was 1.4 million.
And try to let everyone else go first. I think that's the appropriate etiquette in my position. For my part, I do have a report on the work of the CPA Study Committee. The CPA Study Committee hosted a table at the Reading Falls Street Fair, which was pretty well received, distributed a lot of information. The committee is actively soliciting feedback about one question in particular, which is what surcharge rate to recommend. There was a little voting event at the fair. You could put your marble in a different cup. That is going to be a question that committee is going to have when they come to us at the financial forum, assuming that's still what we do. And this extremely non-scientific, non-representative poll, 1% won. We had cups for 0.5, 1, and 1.5. Of course, you can have a CPA surcharge up to 3%, but larger surcharges are not realistically being considered. So there were an awful lot of comments of, I want 1.5, I think I can get 1, and the marble goes in 1. So that's an interesting dynamic that we will want to make sure we understand before we make a recommendation. All right. Karen, I saw you had a hand up. Was that a comment on the select board liaison report or something along those lines? If you want to come to the podium.
I was hoping to speak as a liaison at this upcoming meeting, but I just saw a generic liaison. So.
Okay. Oh, yes, I guess. I have traditionally understood liaison reports to be us liaisoning to other committees, but I don't see why it has to be interpreted that way. So if you have something you'd like to report here, I think that's fine.
Appreciate that.
I never thought of it that way.
Karen Herrick, Reading Select Board. Thank you. Nice job on our long meeting last night, and we met last week as well. And the other thing I wanted to bring to your attention, and Sharon and Matt could give you more detail, is that the fire department came forward with a plan and asked us to raise fees to bring some more in with other communities, and it is going to raise significant revenue, and kudos to that. The message is continuing that it is time to slow the spending. And this committee, I've heard override from y'all, and it's appearing on our agenda whether we talk about potential override or not. So I applaud departments that are able to do that and going to do that. It is a shame the Conservation Commission wasn't able to bring in the revenue that they worked hard with, but it would be good to have this small business in our community anyway. Helping the Girl Scouts and keeping that property in place. So I wanted to let you know, we did have a little email from a concerning email from the MSBA early September. It looks like it's resolved now, where the owner's project manager had overlooked an important document, leaving us vulnerable to no reimbursement in the project. It was serious enough that they sent it to us, and Matt got right on it. So I believe that that's been taken care of, and it was the owner project manager's responsibility. It literally would be, you're entering a new phase and you haven't submitted the documents required, you're proceeding at your own risk. So caught my attention, but I believe we're back on track now. Awesome. Okay. And I did read in your packet tonight the start on thinking about protocols for particularly what's related to the field house. If we're going to do internally managed projects and have a staff member act as the OPM, this project, as far as I know, just kind of skipped a lot of normal protocol. And we heard public comment earlier. I also don't believe any of the items that weren't presented to town meeting were on the capital plan either. So that was kind of another protocol that was skipped. So I appreciate you and Emily, I believe it was, so far taking a first crack at that, because if we have staff members who can act as OPMs, that's great, but we need the visibility. And in this case, for the field house, I'm going to call it unauthorized spending. It had no visibility with the select board, the finance committee, the school committee, or town meeting. So that's just, as we head into 3 more big projects that just can't happen. At the same time, as a select board member, I'm being told that we need an override. Like those things are in opposition. We need to. So I applaud you, and the select board has talked briefly about your wanting to propose some more controls, and I think we can work together on that, and that would be wonderful. So, you do have the reserve fund. So, if we have another internal project and there are some things, because that's what it's for, there are some things that come up that we have an opportunity to do. That's another opportunity where the FinCom could maybe, make sure there's oversight and make sure things are appropriate, things are approved. And I think town meeting would feel better about that. But aside from that, that's what I'm struggling with as a select board member, and the select board is struggling, is that, we can't be talking about an override and having spending that is not, within our normal protocol. So anyway, thank you for all your hard work, and keep on.
Thank you, Karen. All right, so moving on in the agenda, the next item is the discussion of policies and practices for projects that come in under budget. I'd like to start by giving some context. It's largely my fault that we have this topic on the agenda. As you all recall, we did have a presentation about the Fieldhouse 4 project and the various things that were included in that at our last meeting. After that, several residents reached out. Some members of this committee expressed some surprise. I think some residents reached out and expressed more acute surprise at what was and was not considered in scope. As we talked about at our last meeting, trust between town meeting and town staff is essential. And I personally don't want to see anything happen that would undermine that. I thought that we should try to figure out, what is something that we can do. This is sort of the problem statement that I would like to start with is, what can we do as finance committee to help, reinforce that trust and stay on the same page so that people aren't surprised and don't have, don't vote against things in the future because they're, uncomfortable about things in the past. Karen, this is correct. Emily and I did draft called it a policy memo. Perhaps that was the wrong word. Talk about terminology in a second. It was shared with everyone in the packet. Now, we should probably take a look at the one that's in the packet. I should also say, though, that yesterday evening, Matt had shared that document with town council, who had a lot of feedback on it. Not too surprising. I wasn't personally trying to create a legal document. I am not a lawyer, and I never want to be interpreted as pretending to be one. Many things, law, project management, a lot of things are best left to professionals, certainly when it comes to the details. So I think maybe the right place to start is to look at, and I would love to hear any feedback from anyone on the committee about the memo, the draft policy memo in the packet. And then maybe we could go on from there to talk about the feedback that we got from town council, and then, figure out what we think our next step should be. Thank you. Jackie has, of course, pulled up the thing that I, was talking about, because thank you. Okay, go for it, Mark.
So I read through it. I think the issue is really a town meeting issue, and when we add some of this, it becomes subjective. What is safety? And it can be somewhat subjective. I think sort of I'd be in favor of, when we have capital projects at town meeting, that if you had wording in there that if the bids come in under the discretion of the town manager or the select board, can authorize amounts up to what got approved at town meeting. That way, for if there's any add-ons, kind of delegated to them, to work it versus trying to have, something that becomes somewhat subjective, I thought.
Yes, Maria.
Okay, so I have two questions, one related to your thing and one kind of tied into this spending that came from a citizen. I guess I didn't put it in a report, but it's related to this because a friend who's on RPPA reached out about their donation that's going towards the project because they want to have conditions that, just like we want, town meeting wants its money spent on the project, they would not want the donation spent on anything other than the pickleball courts or, something related to that. And they don't know, they said, well, they're being asked to sign something with their donation. Like they don't know when they donate money towards a project, is that money used first and then the town does borrowing? And then if there's excess, because it's town borrowing, the town can do what they want versus, so they're concerned their donation would be used on something other than the project. So that's just one question about how are donations applied. But my other question, just on this policy, and I'm looking at the charter, and I know there's changes to the charter, but I don't think there's changes to this part, is moving forward, are we supposed to be auditing like projects on an ongoing basis to make sure that they're being spent in accordance with the town meeting, not dictates, but what was in the warrant? And I don't know whether that falls under, all the duties of finance committees under the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, or whether it falls under, we have the power, quote unquote, power to investigate the books, accounts, records, and management of any office, board, or committee in town, because I don't feel like overseeing capital projects fits into that. So I just want to understand what you think, given this policy, what do you think our role is going to be? And then just the side question, maybe to Sharon, how does something like donations apply to projects and borrowing?
My mic's not on. So we would use the cash first and then we would borrow because it costs a lot to borrow. So we've started working using the transfers that we had for donations and from the ice arena to get started. So it ends up being that whatever the remainder is what we would end up borrowing. But anything that's supposed to be remaining, we would bring back to town meeting, or should have always brought back to town meeting for vote to reapply it to another project or whatever that might be. And especially borrowings, they absolutely should be coming back to town meeting.
So in theory, right, not for pickleball, but say somebody else donates something and they donate more than what's needed for a project. Can they can't impose conditions on how that donation is used? The town just can treat it like its own funds and do what they want? Or
a lot of times donations come in for specific purposes. They're earmarked and kept separate. And that's where we charge whatever we do related to what they requested, so that if they came back to us, we'd have proof of what we purchased and what the invoices were that made up the actual donation. Sorry. So yeah, we would earmark it. If somebody gave us a donation and said, I specifically want park benches, we would set up something separate. The money would be in one line and nobody else could use it. If it's a donation that's not kind of specific, what it could be used for, kind of an open-ended, we could use whatever we want, it would sit in the donation account where we'd have more purview to do what we want. But when somebody gives us parameters about how we want the money to be used, we do set up.
so like if there was a future donate, say that you use up all the RPPA money and project's done, and then they raise some more money and want lighting, and they'd say, we're donating this, go put it out to bid, but it only can be used for pickleball lighting, not turf 2 lighting or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, we definitely, anything that's earmarked, we set up separately so that it can't be commingled with funds that isn't kind of earmarked for anything. Yeah, something.
Please.
Along these same lines, we do a gift agreement with the donor entity, so organization or individual, and that gift agreement outlines all of those pieces. It's to be used for these purposes. If there are exclusions, they're specifically mentioned, because we always want to honor what the donors wishes. We're grateful for our donors. We love working with our donors, but it's always about what is the donor looking to do, and we want to memorialize that for, on all time, so we follow that.
So I think maybe some of the people who were speaking tonight, not that I'm speaking for you, but it sounds like we should treat our town meeting at least as well as we treat our donors, right? And account to them how the money's going. And if it's something's in the warrant article, people are going to expect, well, something to be spent that way. Thanks.
I saw Joe's hand first, so go ahead, Joe.
So in terms of the policy first, I'm not sure if this should be added or not. Open to opinion, but just we have a point about protecting the town's investment, but also obviously we don't want a change, which I can't think of a good example, but a change that would lead to increased operating costs, right, or maintenance costs, more FTE, whatever, right? I'm not sure if it's necessary to call that out. I agree with Mike too on the point about the subjectivity. Personally, I think we have a lot of projects going on now. It's hard to wonder if it would help avoid the situation, if we had some standardized, I don't know, I just think of your typical project or program scorecard, with the RAG status, red, amber, green, and try to capture at a high level. Is it project on schedule? Is it under or over budget? Just a one pager with what the charter and the mission was, and the high level, what's in scope for a particular project. And I'm not trying to make it onerous, and I know that role is more budgeted in your bigger project, but maybe for a certain size project, it's that would help kind of protect that money, and I think hopefully provide more transparency if people saw, oh, well, there's been a change, and then my next question would be to Mary Ann's, what actually is our role? But I think it would be good transparency for other people besides Finance Committee, whether it be the Select Board or interested parties, right? And then we'd have standardized scorecards, and it'd be easy to review each month, where they were, and if there were questions, right? Try to figure out, okay, should something be in or out of scope, and let the people that are involved with that particular project, represent why they think it should be added in scope. So.
Thanks, Joe. John?
Thanks. Just a couple of clarifying questions, and if these are obvious to everybody else, then I apologize for my ignorance, but when we talk about project coming in under budget, does that mean under what town meeting appropriated for it, or under what the bid was? Do we need to have separate? Should those be treated differently?
Yes, they should be treated differently because bids are one part of a project, right? Most projects have more than one bid. Big projects have more than one bid. It's not just necessarily one vendor that's providing something to the core part of your project, right? So with the field house floor, and I think that Joe Huggins might be on the phone, but there's the wood floor. There was the demolition that had to be done. There was the wood floor with multiple layers that had to be put in and subsurface. There's styrofoam in there. There's whatever. And then there's the track that goes around. It's a different material. And then the track had to be painted, and that was a different vendor. So there's never just one. Now, if there's a general contractor that's hired in, they may sub that out. So that may come in as one bid, and we bid it out that way. I don't know how we bid out the floor. I'm not the procurement director anymore, but they report to me, and I am MCPPO certified. So so there are bids that come in, but there are often multiple bids depending. So if it's a paving contract, we're going to bid it out to a paver to do certain work, and that's going to be one contract. If it's Killam or Recal, it's lots and lots of bids, and we are amping up to carry that load. So there's a lot of pieces there. So when we say that a project is on time and under budget. It's the budget that town meeting appropriates based on the article in the warrant. We are always looking at the article in the warrant. It's that language that we are looking to stay within the four corners of at all times. And it bears mentioning that when we talk about projects, we have a tremendous amount of oversight. We have Mass General laws, we have bylaws, the town charter that we have to follow. We have detailed design and project management systems that we use, and sometimes vendors, like with our OPM. We have finances, internal controls. If there are change orders that have to happen, they have to be signed off on by the procurement officer. We have internal project oversight, layers of management, and boards that we report to. So there's a lot going on for these things, but in certain projects, there are small changes that are made, internally in the field. And I think it's also bears mentioning that when a project is brought to town meeting, it's usually brought at 25% design. So when we talk about project management, you have your feasibility study, and you have your design work that starts in schematic design. That's your 25% design, where we come up with what we think the budget's going to be, and you bring that forward to town meeting. We're not going to 50% design before town meeting. Why would you spend that money if it's not going to be approved? And that's where we go forward. Then you go into the further design work, and you start to refine the design, and you're doing more test. You might be doing geo testing. You might be doing all kinds of different work, and you find, all right, I'm in the field, something's different here, we have to make a change. This isn't going to fit this way, we're going to have to do something different. And that's where you start to see more refinement of your design as you work toward your 100% document. So that's there's a lot that goes into these projects, and there's a lot that happens in the field. For example, with the field house project, they ripped up the old floor. They took everything out of the field house. It all has to happen during the summertime while the students aren't there. And they took out the old bleachers. And they looked at the walls, and they're like, well, this is a mess, and it has to be painted. We have a painting contract. We have an on-call painting contract that we procure. And so they call the painting contractor, like, can you possibly get in here before if this floor gets installed, before the bleachers have to go in? So they're working those relationships and those existing contracts to make that happen, because you're never going to paint that wall for another 30 years once that's done. So it's those kind of things. That's a call that's made in the field, and it's like, we have to do this because everybody's going to come in here and look at us and say, why didn't you paint these walls? It's a mess. And if you go in there, you'll see it's painted to the I-beam. And then above that, the sound panels, it stands out, because those are original. There were a lot of pieces that were kept in that project, but I just wanted to put some of this. There's a lot of refinement. There's a lot of detail that goes into this. And I think what we really would behoove us is to bring more information forward. It's what I'm hearing is more communication. I love this kind of project scorecard as a neat idea. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
John, do you have
So if I'm understanding, I understand on a really big project, there's going to be multiple bids that all come out. And we talked at, I think, the last meeting that at least once the money is borrowed, we can't just return it to the taxpayer, right? It's got to go to a project.
It has to go to a project, yeah.
But if all the bids start coming in lower than what town meeting approved, and we don't borrow as much, we can just not spend the extra money.
Yeah, we cannot spend the money, we cannot borrow the money, and we can just rescind the unused debt authorization. So let's say it came in 200 under, we could rescind that 200,000 of debt authorization so that we can't use it later. So, but if we've already borrowed it, we would ask town meeting to reallocate the funds to a project.
Right. So I guess I'm wondering if it makes sense, do we need separate policies for money that has been borrowed but not spent versus money that hasn't been borrowed if we come under? Is that making things too complicated?
John is looking at me. I feel like I should respond. First, actually, I want to say that if I had answered the question directed to Jane, I would have answered it the same way. But I don't. And I did include something at the end of this about how the way the spending is structured. Is it one bid? Is it 73 bids? Is it one bid and then somebody went out to Walmart credit card? I'm not an expert in procurement. I don't know how that works. and I don't, and so I don't think that's what anyone is concerned about. The concern is if the amount allocated by town meeting and whether any of that money might potentially not be spent. All right, I see Ed and Jeff. I'll go with Jeffrey first.
Yeah, so I went back after our meeting and looked at the warrant article, and if I could just read the part that says, move that the town vote to appropriate $1.3 million to pay the cost of making improvements to the Reading Memorial High School Fieldhouse, including not limited to, that's all right. So clearly all the work done was improving the Fieldhouse, which is specifically the text there. On the other hand, I listened to that presentation 3 times at the school committee at the finance committee at town meeting, and there were questions about, well, what if it goes over? But there was never a question of what if it goes under. And I think to some extent, maybe we don't need a policy, but maybe we just need to make it clear to everybody who comes with a proposal to town meeting, we're going to ask you what happens if it comes under. What are the things that you will do if you get the bid that comes under? What are the things that you kind of like town meeting to say yes or no? I sort of feel like in this town, we tend to support our sport things. So if any of these items had actually gone to town meeting, the other improvements that weren't specifically called out, including but not limited to, like painting the walls, I think it would have passed, right? I don't think that we really would have. And maybe if someone had looked at 300,000 and said, "Wow, that's a lot of money to go over," but a lot of these things were things that, yeah, if you want that field house to look good, we should go ahead and do that. We should paint those walls behind it. So, somehow can we get just an expectation that when someone comes with a bid and says, if we go over, we have to come to FinCom and ask for a little bit of reserve money, or we have to go back to town meeting to ask for more money, which was actually, that was the 1.3 because they wanted to do a better floor that was safer, better for athletes. But also, if you come under, what are some other things that you feel fit within the scope that would be appropriate use of that money so that town meeting can feel, yeah, you told us that this was something that would make sense.
Thank you. Ed.
Thanks, Joe. First, I should say, thank you to you, Mr. Chair, and Mrs. Vice Chair for taking the stab at this. I'm sure it was mostly Emily, but yeah. He's honestly, thank you for taking a stab at it. Again, and I'm sure this was kind of an effort to kind of do something in light of the discussion that we had last time. So, and I think, we all go in knowing that you're working towards something and it's never perfect out of the gate. So again, I really appreciate it. And some of the kind of questions and comments I have, these may apply more to like what, kind of town council's feedback was, but, I think there's a lot of, and it kind of reflects a lot of the other comments that have been said already, but like, do we need further definition of what a project is, or, when a project manager is, and do we need to call out on the warrant when there needs to be a project manager and who that is, if it's going to be, kind of or do we need, kind of, I think this was either to John's point or someone else's, like, are there, different set of rules for if it's, kind of a, town staff that does it versus outside, things of that nature. I think there's, other things that we need to understand. And I really kind of took a lot out of what Jane said. And I think that's important for us to realize, is that there's a tremendous amount of nuance, and and specifically for this floor, I don't think we want to be in a position that we're kind of burdening because time is of the essence. This had to be done over the summer. But I think that especially for a lot of these school projects, and I remember not too long ago for for fields, it's the same thing, where you're trying to do something on a tighter time frame, and I think certain there needs to be a little bit of latitude that's, kind of introduced here. And I'll go back to, Mark's original point. I really like his idea about, kind of, beefing up, for lack of a better term, kind of what's in the warrant or defining the project. And then just to echo what Jeffrey just said, I think that's, in that presentation that's made to town meeting, I think and we talked about this last time, having more meat in there about what happens on one, if it goes up, if you're over or if you're under, I think all those things are important. And I do think this kind of fits within our purview. I mean, really, we're here to advise, town meeting. And so we can do that job better the more educated that we are. And the scorecard idea and the communications, I think that would be helpful. And again, I don't know if this actually starts to bleed into, to Mr. Chair, into if we had a capital committee where some of these things might, like where you have an avenue for that. I know that we kind of have, kind of both hats, and and not to further complicate this, but maybe that's another another avenue that we can pursue as well. Thanks a lot there, but just wanted to be able to share that.
Appreciate that. Andrew, you want to comment? So a few things about this. From what I'm hearing from everybody is that we do realize there is something that we all agree on, that we need to do something. However, in my personal opinion, I don't think a policy for it is the right answer. I think that Jane touched a little bit on it, it all comes down to communication, and we should look at what levers do we have to do that. And one of the best ones is that we have we can request an update at any time during a project, at any time about how the project is going. And we should think about coming up with a way of doing this as a best practice, that when a project is going on, maybe we get an update. I'm not sure how frequent that update would be, but I would say that that's the right step forward, in my personal opinion, about how to address this issue. There's a few reasons that I don't fully support the policy, because sometimes policies are very restrictive. And in projects like this, I look at what would have happened if it went the opposite way. For example, if we had this policy, if it says that it has to go back to town meeting, and it puts a restriction that you cannot go over what was authorized or what was the big thing. So let's entertain that idea. What happens? What will happen is that Joe would have not done anything, would have just stopped it, and then after 8 months, when November comes, or 6 months, it would go back to town meeting, and town meeting most likely will have approved it. But now you have to bid it again. You have to get another company there, more bids. We're talking about the overhead. So it's way, way, way more expensive. In this type of projects, you have contingency building it, and also we do trust our project managers to do their best. It's just economies of scales. Also, the amount of money involved with it, if you had to do another borrowing, it will cost way more. So I would be kind of careful there. The other thing that I wanted to mention is in the policy says that there should be a balance. We should balance the need for professional judgment and town meeting's authority. In these cases, I agree, but then at the same time, we're giving most of the authority to town meeting. But how practical is that? That's why how practically it has to go back to town meeting, which is twice a year. We touched base a little bit in the increase in project cost, and then for the other thing is who is the recipient, who's benefiting from what happened, and I think we should look at that. It's the students, it's the school, And I think the way that the project was handled was the right way. But as we all agree in this room, we need to do something about it. So next time that it happens, we are either aware of it or we have a process in place that will call this out. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw Emily on Zoom.
So I love these meetings because I feel like we always have a really good dialogue that makes me change my mind about things back and forth 5 times. So to respond to Ed's comment, yes, Joe and I kind of drafting this was an effort to, try to respond to the criticism or concerns that we were hearing from the citizens that reached out. And I don't think anybody begrudged, the painting or, some of the material improvements that were made. I think the most concern we heard was around, the scoreboard and, a couple of things that people felt like it was presented as a floor and bleachers and, refresh, and that felt outside of the scope. So we just wanted to try to put some parameters around it, like, okay, well, if we're saying, if the scope of the warrant article is sufficiently broad, like this one was, right? Improvements, including, but not limited to, just trying to put some, guideposts on what we would consider those improvements. And thinking, reflecting on Marianne's comments in particular, like, is this a policy we would enforce? Do we have jurisdiction over it? I think maybe the answer is probably not. And I appreciate Jane giving us context for like, what were the things and how did these decisions come to pass? So, I'm feeling more and more like there are other ways we can, I agree with Andrea. I think that the policy might be making it a policy might be too restrictive, but, really keeping an open dialogue with town staff and project managers, whether they're internal or external to town staff, I think it's just, especially in this time where the belts are tightening and the economy is, going the way it's going, I think it's really important for us to maintain a really open and constructive dialogue with town staff. Whether that takes the form of policy or not, I don't know, but I really appreciate the thoughtful discussion. And for the record, Ed, Joe and I worked on this together. It wasn't all me. Thanks, Joe.
I think, Mark, go ahead. And then I'm going to call myself after Mark.
So I think the reality is that most projects that come to town meeting are always going to be for more money than probably needed, because they're not going to want to come back. If the bids had come in for $3 million for the floor, and then it needed to be painted, what do? You stop and you got to wait till the next town meeting. So, so I think the reality is all of these articles, they're all going to come in for higher. So we're always going to have, the bids come in lower. So I think this is going to be, and I've been on this committee for 5+ years, so I've never seen one that there wasn't a little bit of room. So I think it's more of, how do we handle it through town meeting, like I said before. And you can't detail everything. Like, the gym floor, they didn't know it was going to need to be painted. So I think there's got to be some liberty there that, like, if something, I said it earlier, if something comes up that, it shouldn't be Joe who's overseeing it and approving it. And this kind of got him in a tough spot where it should be, either goes to select board or the town manager, has a leeway up to a certain amount. It shouldn't have to go back to town meeting, but these things are going to happen, and it's going to happen more in the future. We've got some big projects coming up, and I would hate to see, them have to stop for a $25,000 item, but it would have, if Matt was involved with the select board, they might have said, hey, the scoreboard, I know that there's boosters who have money, who could have paid for that, but boosters aren't going to pay for paint in the gym. So I think the town manager or the select board would know and quickly could act on that. So, but I'm with Andre, sort of agree. Our policy, I don't think it's got any teeth, and it probably could slow things down or not really work the way we want it to.
So calling on myself there, this has been first +1 to Emily's comment about the quality of discussions here. I do appreciate it. And definitely, I think I alluded earlier to a couple things. I alluded to whether policy is the right word because I already had a hunch that maybe it wasn't. Others have made that point better than I could. I also, so I guess there is one point that's been though that I haven't heard anyone express, and I'm curious if there's something we could do about, which is that so there's, as people pointed out, project managers have to use their discretion. They're not coming back to town meeting every 2 seconds because we don't have town meeting every 2 seconds. Also be a waste of everyone's time. They're using they have a ton of discretion. They should have a ton of discretion. They also have a professional background that makes them better qualified to exercise that discretion, certainly than I am. But there is a sentiment that I am hearing from everyone I talk to among the residents of this town that, if you have a discretion and you have a choice of do I want to err on the side of getting more for the money that was allocated or err on the side of turning some of the money back, that a lot of people would like to see us turn some of the money back. And I don't know how to express that because it's not a hard and fast rule. Hard and fast rules those are called laws, and those are for lawyers. And as I said before, I am not one of those. But I, do understand people's feeling about, they would have liked to have seen some money turned back in this case. If it had been up to them, maybe they would have put off the scoreboard and had, a few tens of $1,000s turned back because every bit helps. Go ahead, Mary.
Just to build on that, and then I saw John's hand up. Would it make sense to build that decision into the warrant article to ask town meeting what they would prefer, or is that just creating chaos to have it be different so that, Joe Huggins or someone has to say, well, let me go look back at the warrant. Do I have discretion this time, or this one I do, this one I don't? What do people think about making it? Because it may be relative to the amount of the spend and what the task is. There's things that nobody's questioning that maybe aren't in the warrant, that staff are using their discretion all the time, but then there's others. We could all say, yep, be perfect and scope it better so that we don't have to find out about this later. But we also, town meeting could decide, we allow you discretion up to a certain point, and then if it's more than, 5% of the bid cost, return the money or something like that. I don't know.
Go ahead, John, and then I'll call myself out again after John.
So I guess continuing to build on that, I feel like there's a spectrum of project manager can say, I want to get the best possible project up to this amount of money versus I want to get, what was kind of proposed for as cheap as possible. And there's always going to be wiggle room. There's always going to be somewhere in between those two ends. And I feel like some people at town meeting are going to say, well, I thought we should have gone further to one side versus further to the other side. So it's really hard to have a policy that decides where we're going to end up on that spectrum, because there's, it's a lot of not guesswork, but discretion by project manager. So I feel like I don't know how you write a policy that town meeting or whoever can kind of decide where do we end up on the, one side or the other. And I feel like part of my concern with some of this wording is that there's a lot of things that, depending on your perspective, could be, necessary or not necessary for the reasons stated there. Like if it's subjective, thank you, that's the word. Like if you're a town meeting member that wants this project to come in as cheap as possible, you might say batting cages are a unnecessary addition. But if you're somebody who's like, we want the best field house we can get them, those are a safety feature, right? We're keeping baseballs from flying around.
That is technically correct. I'm not going to contemplate hitting baseballs around inside the field house without a net.
I think while I've got my other concern is that some projects, and I'm thinking kind of specifically about the pickleball courts, it kind of sounded, I remember from town meeting, like we approved for up to a certain amount, but the expectation is that the bids are going to come in less than that. And I think that this could get kind of tricky if like the bids come in lower and then project manager says like, well, we're going to do all these upgrades up to that amount, you know? If you're the project manager, if you want to, but like, there's no policy that says, there's no policy or guidance that says you wouldn't be able to do that, right? Like it's all just kind of, we're depending on the judgment of a project manager and like.
I feel like you're asking me a question, and I don't want to
go ahead.
Unless I'm asked. This is your meeting. So a few things. We absolutely run by the warrant. We look at the warrant. The warrant, the town meeting is the authority, and so we go by what's in the warrant. In the case of the Fieldhouse project, to Ms. Sisson's point, it's a broader thing. A lot of our warrant articles are written like that. The point of the Fieldhouse floor is we got to get this floor at 25% design. We think it's going to cost this, and as you go forward in a project, the costs come down because your escalation is reduced. So that's a little insight there. You mentioned, what are some of the things you mentioned? There were like 12 things I wanted to respond to. We always follow what's in the warrant. Yes, it is. A lot of it is at the discretion of the project manager. Your project managers in this town are degreed, they're licensed, they're certified, they have many years of experience. You really have a tremendous staff. As somebody who's, understands what's going on in different towns, we just have amazing folks. Our town engineer, Joe Huggins, Kevin Cabuzzi, our DPW staff at many levels, at all levels that are running projects. They're really spectacular, and it's my pleasure and my privilege to work with them. Usually the call that is made is what is protecting the investment for the town. It's Reading first. What's protecting the investment for the town? So we're investing a lot of money in this floor. What are the other pieces around that? I understand where you're coming from with the scoreboard for sure. The nets and the curtains are part of that project. There are 10 basketball hoops in that space. 2 have been slated to be replaced as part of the project. The other 8 are the old ones. All the mats around that room are the same. They have not been upgraded. The batting cage is a net that comes down. I thought a batting cage, you and I are on the same, like a batting cage. And then, it's this net right here on top of the track. If it has old and has holes in it, we really should replace that as part of the project. So the thinking, talking to these individuals regularly, is what is protecting the investment of the town. And there can be some latitude there we are trusting. Another thing that's important, that change orders cannot exceed, slightly very off topic, change orders cannot exceed 25% of the project. The town manager has the authority to work with project managers to authorize, should this be done, should this not be done. Guidance is important, I think, in financial environments where we really don't want to be spending extra. Even though your project may have come in under what we authorized, maybe we want to be careful about any extras in this environment. And that's good guidance. And that's a good part of the conversation. Nobody wants to be wasteful. Everybody is always looking at what is the best that we can do for the town and protect the town's investments, so we're not coming back in here. We're not ripping up roads again. We've done a huge series of utility projects over the last 10 years in the downtown to get to the point where we don't have to open a road for 20 years. That's amazing. And then, so once those roads get redone, it'll be clean sailing for a long time. Those are the things that our engineers, our teams, and our hired vendors are all working on. So I hope that is there more clarity I can offer. I missed your question. It's all over the place.
No, I think it's all helpful. I think it's just, it all just kind of comes back to there's a spectrum of what we can get on all these projects probably for the money that's approved, and there's a lot of judgment calls in there, and some people on town meeting are going to want the judgment calls to go one way, and some are going to go the other way. Yeah.
If there's a consensus at town meeting, we could, anything that's put in the motion and is a town meeting vote, that's supreme. These policies, unfortunately, they're not enforceable. what town meeting says is enforceable, and we all respect town meeting. So on town meeting floor, if something was to be worked in the motion, something like that, we'd have some guidance on it. But I think on this project in particular, everybody did a great job. There was a savings there. It was used in the four corners of the warrant article. We followed the guidance of town meeting, and I'd like to turn money back to it in appropriate situations. But here we had an opportunity. The opportunity was taken to do some more improvements within town meeting's discretion, what they told us to do, and that's what was done. So I don't think we have to go through town council's comments on this. I'm not even sure if she intended them to be public beyond, this body. But I don't think a policy like this is enforceable. I appreciate the work on it. I'll take the guidance on it for sure, and the sentiment is there. But if anything, it could be seen as an attempt to limit town meeting's authority, and legally you just can't do that. So I know that wasn't the intent, but we read the comments too from, so we'll take a lot of this back. This is great feedback. I love the discussion. And I'm sure town meetings floor will have projects, they'll have things to say about it. Also, I think we could have, and I think Tom Milishevsky and I agree that we could have done maybe a little bit better job in the presentation at first to say, okay, if there is extra money, this is what will be included. And we said that in the meetings that we had, but I don't think there was anything wrong with the way things were done. There was a savings, and it was put to good use. In the future, we can be a little more descriptive at town meeting, and we'll do that. So.
I see Karen has a hand up.
Just a quick comment. As we're talking about things.
Just for the folks on Zoom and RCTV and so forth, please.
Karen Herrick, Select Board. A quick comment. In thinking about how we're going to do things better, communication, clear warrant articles. Town meeting should have known if this was going to be a fieldhouse renovation project. It should have been titled Fieldhouse Renovation Project, not Fieldhouse Floor. This was a capital request that kind of jumped ahead of everything, and it was floor. And there's a news report where Ed actually had to say on floor of town meeting, we're doing the bleachers, so let's put the bleachers in the warrant article. And I can't find it on the website, but there's news out there, so it must be accurate. We have a permanent building committee, and we are renovating buildings. So that's something that we should put into warrant articles to guide like the level of communication for town meeting. The threshold, according to the website, is still 1.5 million. And then that would have been another guardrail and another set of eyes by professionals, talking about what's in scope, what's not in scope, because that's a big concern for a lot of residents in town meeting. At this point. And that's it. Thank you. Good discussion.
Yep. Thank you. Good discussion. I agree.
Yep. I want to, so I do want to say that I was intentional in my choice of reaching for an unenforceable policy rather than proposing that we do warrant articles differently. Mm-hmm. I believe that the current practice in which warrant articles are, to my, eyes, intentionally, well, I'll just put it this way. They intentionally allow for unforeseen, variations that become, necessary for the project. Mm-hmm. And we really don't want to, because there are adjustments that are not controversial. There are, such environmental mitigation you discover in the middle of, you dig in the ground and that sort of thing, or again, a safety thing, a legal compliance thing, like. We're not going to spell all of those out ever. And town meeting takes long enough as it does, or as it is. So, it really was trying to capture the sort of spirit of like, can we save some money, folks? And so to that point, I actually want to go back to my original sort of problem statement, which was, what, if anything, and it might be nothing more than having this conversation and maybe repeating something, so this conversation with other audiences and other forums, what can we do to, maintain and reinforce, town meetings, well-earned trust in town staff? What can we make it so that people are not questioning things that, so that we are not getting into minutia that we shouldn't have to get into and that isn't a good use of people's time. And yet at the same time, we also have people who are, protest voting or something.
Right.
So is there
I
anything?
think having this meeting, this discussion is a good start, because we've all heard it. I know what you're saying about town meeting, and I've heard from a couple of town meeting members, most of whom were in the room tonight, but I didn't hear from 192 people saying they were upset. Maybe I don't hear from everybody, but I'm just saying. And I've heard from other people that said, hey, good job on the project. We really needed that scoreboard or whatever. So like you said, a town meeting could go either way, but I don't want to speak for the entirety of town meeting.
Yes, the very problem, the essence of the problem is that none of us, including the project manager, can speak for town meeting.
Right.
We're all speculating as to whether or not town meeting would or would not have approved a given thing. I honestly don't know. Like the point about generally recreational needs, that's something this town values. We have all these fabulous school and rec sports activities, and on the other hand, we're also getting in a bit of a leaner mood. We'd like to start seeing what can we do to keep our taxes from going up faster than they otherwise would.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't tell you which of those two would have carried the day if there had been a debate about a scoreboard in particular.
Right. But in the end, the town meeting passed what they passed. It was purposely vague, as most articles are. And I think, to divine the will of town meeting maybe saw that as a possibility and said, okay, here's the flexibility to do what needs to be done based on the professional advice you get from the project managers, the team, the engineers, and the people at large. Anyway.
Oh, go ahead.
Just would like to make a comment here. So some of these folks that are concerned about what happened, I think they're most concerned about finances and spending money. But I think what will be very beneficial, as we all agree, when we communicate about town meeting one, maybe when we talk about those options, it will be helpful to see how much those options will cost outside of the project. So, for example, if we spend 200K, which was within the scope, within the town meeting warrant, how much would the same work cost outside if we had done it later on? That would be a great figure to discuss, and I think it will convince all of these folks that have they're kind of questioning, which they have the full right to question it. Mm-hmm. And this figure will put this discussion to rest, or maybe we'll open up another discussion. But I think it's an easy, practical approach.
I'm not sure if anything will ever put town meeting discussions to rest, but point taken. So, all right. So here's what I'm hearing so far. So first, I'm hearing that something called a policy is not the right tool for addressing this concern of reassuring and clarifying town meetings understanding of how projects are managed. I am hearing, I'm certainly town staff has already heard a ton of feedback, and does anyone on the committee have any further suggestions on what to do about this? Otherwise, sort of the default is to not take further action on this. I mean, we can always respond when people raise it again in the future. I say when because, well, no. Oh, yeah.
Just, I think, what was the initiative that we got to discussing this? Was this, Mark, wasn't it some kind of suggestion you made, like the periodic check on the status of capital projects, maybe just at least once in between town meetings, we have this kind of a check to see what's going on or something like that? Maybe it's just more formalize the communication to hear what's going on. However this got initiated, I remember you had a very good thought about it in email, and I forget how you framed it. It was like checking on the status. You listed the projects, but maybe it's only projects over a certain amount or capital projects for which there's borrowing, maybe.
Well, the idea was, for Sharon to present periodically, and I'm not sure Sharon knows all the details we're talking about. So I think it's two separate topics. And, this has been good for me because on the field house, I thought it was all done in a vacuum. Like I didn't know, Matt, that you were up to speed on everything that was going on and it had approved it. So I think that's part of the confusion here was like, did they just go off and do things? How was it all? So I think part of that, that's why I say in town meeting, if it's known that the scope is written broad, but I think town meeting members would feel more comfortable that, and Matt's looking out for, where we are fund-wise in the town. So it's sort of like, it's his responsibility up to that. I think people don't know, I didn't know that existed. I didn't know what the process was. But I think it's two separate things. It is good to know where we are in the projects because when we have more capital projects coming, like it was great that down by the train station, that basically is, very little town money is going to be needed for that. But it'd be good to know where those pockets of money are at all times because we've, who knows, we're going to be borrowing for the school, a lot of money. And even for the senior center, I think I saw something where that looks like it's coming in a little under what was appropriated. So, I mean, if that comes out $1.5 million under, well, that's money for other projects and that's what I was looking at, could we have sort of that scorecard? Anything that goes over has to go back to town meeting. So that's not really the issue. It's just where is the pockets that we've got and what can we do with it? So.
John.
Matt, if I'm understanding that right, you're kind of overseeing the project managers on a lot of these.
On this project, it was a school project. I'm involved in the Kiln School quite a bit. Dr. Milishevsky, was primary. It's one of his buildings. It's under the discretion of the school committee. But Joe Huggins, as you know, and he's on the call, does an excellent job, and he works for both of us. So he's split. So we both have discretion over Joe. We trust Joe to do the right thing. And so, I hate to divide that, okay, it's the school's doing this and the town's doing, we're all one town and we work together well. And Joe's an example of that. He works for both. And he keeps us both informed. I meet with him regularly. Dr. Milishevsky meets with him regularly. So, and on the Killam project, it's the same thing.
And so then, I guess, is there anything that town meeting could do to give you kind of direction on which way, like I keep coming back to, there's like the spectrum of best possible project versus least possible money.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah.
Town meeting can kind of give you direction on which way to try to steer things when they approve it. Is there wording that could go into these articles, or do you think that you have a good sense from being at town meeting and hearing what people are saying?
I mean, I'm at every town meeting and I get a sense of everything. And sometimes I go back and watch again and look at the record. When this came back, we looked back and read things. And so I get pretty good direction from town meeting. Yeah. So.
All right. On Zoom, I see, speaking of Joe Huggins, I think that's actually the next hand I saw.
Speaking Joe Huggins.
Hey, everybody.
Joe.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, loud and clear.
So, like Matt said, yes, we do communicate regularly on projects and status. And keep in mind that all of these projects that we do, even if it's in town buildings, but mostly the schools, are driven by a very tight time schedule. And we have architects working for us on these projects so that when the bills are coming in and we're doing progress payments, everything is vetted out 100%. So, we make sure that the progress payments align fully with the amount of work that's been getting done. I'd have no problem meeting with you folks to talk about where we are, where we stand, and where we're tracking on any project that we're doing. But the problem is, like the fieldhouse floor, that started in at the end of May, the very beginning of June, and it ended in August. So it's difficult in those projects because it's moving so fast. It's like a freight train going down the tracks. Another thing to keep in mind too, that we did know, we got to a certain point in construction when we were, I'll call it out of the ground, if you will, that we knew we were gonna have a surplus, and we didn't engage any change orders or purchase extra things in the field house until we got to that spot. But the decisions on what was to be spent, the money spent on, we had a priority list. So it really was not done in a vacuum. It was, it was well thought out. We brought in all the stakeholders from the school department, the athletic director, my department, and the superintendent of schools, who was very involved in that project. So, and a lot of them are like that, because really, in reality, we've only got 2 months to get these things done. We try not to do construction during the school year.
All right, thanks, Joe. So we have a lot of Joes. I'm part of the problem. Joe McDonough has a hand up.
Yeah, just build on what Joe just said. Like I generally have good trust or faith in decisions like people like Joe are making, Matt, Jane, they did a good job walking through how some of these decisions are made. I think to me, it just comes back to not policy, but some type of, it'd be nice if it was, again, and standardized into some type of scorecard. And I don't want to make it onerous either. I don't want Joe to be mid-July trying to make a decision on the painting and waiting for the next finance committee meeting. But I think it would be helpful, not just for the finance committee, but for others, just to have some type of scorecard where we can get quick updates on these projects. And I don't know what the right frequency is, even bi-monthly even, or but these are a sizable amount of money of some of the projects that are coming up, and the more that we could standardize it and really more from a transparency communication standpoint, I think there would be people that would benefit from that.
Thanks, Joe. It occurs to me, just thinking out loud, that we of course vote on every single financial article that comes to town meeting. And we report on them. And so we are in a position to raise the question and or express our own opinion about that continuum that John articulated, which again, I think is because it's and I'll join the chorus here. If I wanted somebody to get as much as possible for $3 million in a field house, I would ask Joe Huggins. If I wanted somebody to get us a narrowly specified floor and bleachers and absolutely nothing more, as for as little as possible, that's Joe Huggins. It's not a question of that. It's a question of which of those two did town meeting want this time. And I think a lot of town meeting members were surprised where we ended up in that range. And so that's the kind of thing that's, with democracy, town meeting is kind of right definition, but still at the same time, I do feel like on behalf of town meeting, we can do better in terms of articulating our preferences. I think with pickleball, I think that was pretty clear. There was a yes. Yes, Jane is making a face because it was extremely clear that town meeting was frankly borderline on the spending that much money, and so in that case it was unambiguous that we wanted to get the approved amount of pickleball courts for as little as possible, or less if that's financially required. So in that case, town meeting was clear about its communication. So, other comments on this agenda item? All right, moving on. The next item is more just an informational update. We have talked before about our policies. And so I just wanted to update the committee because I did, after chatting with Matt about how to go about this, write a memo to the select board about having the Financial Management Resource Bureau of the Division of Local Services do a free review of our financial policies. I said, the memo is in the packet. It's the same things that we said back when we talked about this in our meeting in late June. It's in a lot of cases, it's not that I'm aware of any problems with the policies. It's more that there's an opportunity to capture what we're doing that's working and keep doing it. And it is free. Free is nice. And it's also, going to that point again about the trust of the voters. I mean, this is in the end, everything is politics, it seems. And, this is another thing that we can do to, show, make our commitments to fiscal responsibility visible to the community. So I just sent that memo to, I got that probably on Monday morning. Obviously, the select board had a very busy night last night. They certainly didn't have time to take it up yet, but I will keep you all posted. Whatever we hear back from them. Man.
So I'm just curious, because I didn't attend that webinar. Like, did you speak with anyone, or did anyone, any other community, actually get this done and tell what the process was? And have you seen the output of the process? I'm just curious if we know what it's going to entail.
Speaking for myself, I don't think I've seen as much detail as I'd like. I only have so much time I can put into FinCom stuff. We did hear stories from several other communities. Now, I will say, though, that I think those other communities might not have had as good of policies and practices as Reading has to begin with. So they had maybe a little more room for improvement. And they talked about, the credit rating of such and such a community went up after they did this. Like, well, we already have a great credit rating. Thank you. So I recognize that that's not the improving our credit rating is not the pitch here. Jeffrey.
Yeah. So in terms of it, the cost of it being free, I mean, there's no dollar amount, but I assume that there's going to be some.
It will take some town staff time. I assume.
Save their time on town staff's too, unless they're just pulling documents off of our website. So just town staff on board with whatever requirements will be to interact with them and give them the information that they are requesting.
I mean, I can't speak for the entire town staff, and I haven't sent it to the entire town staff. I mean, we want to do whatever is helpful if this is something that FinCom wants, and it's free, so it's not coming. We don't have to find it in the budget to do it. I don't see why it wouldn't be. I mean, I don't particularly think it's going to be a heavy lift on town staff. I mean, maybe. And Sharon can speak about this too, because she runs the finance staff. Getting some of these policies together and working with the state seems to be a good exercise, but I did, we did send that to the select board. I will make sure it's on an agenda or talk to the chairs about putting it on an agenda. So it's discussed, and somebody from FinCom, maybe Joe, you may want to attend that meeting just to explain why FinCom sees the need for it. Sharon, I don't know if you think town staff would be too much of a heavy lift, or.
I don't think it'd be too much of a heavy lift. I feel like it would be, every so many years you should be looking at your policies anyway. Having an objective third party take a look and make some suggestions is always helpful. So I'd be open to it.
Yeah. Speaking for myself, I appreciate that that response and that openness to the suggestion. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments from anyone? Oh, I don't see anyone on the Zoom. All right. So then I believe we are on to future agendas. So you know what I don't have in front of me actually is the brainstorm we've already done for financial forum topics. Probably should have. This is another thing that Emily was helpful with in terms of getting some bullets down for the financial forum. So since I didn't send it to Jackie, we can't put it on the screen. But let me just read off what we have so far, and then I'm very interested if people have other suggestions. So as always, open comment. As always, a presentation on free cash projections and financial forecasting. If we do nothing else, we do that. It's interesting in presentation. There's interest in hearing about our long-term financial obligations, pension and OPEB, where we are with these right now. There was interest in asking it is not, and that is a mistake on my part. I apologize.
Okay, no,
I will.
I didn't know if I had the latest.
I'll
packet.
take what I have and put it in a I believe I can. Let me hold on. Let me first blow it up so it matches what we
CPA.
and then let me try presenting. Yes, it is. I haven't gotten that far in the agenda yet.
That's the only thing I remember.
Yep. Hold on one sec. Where is my Zoom window? That's not my Zoom window. That is. Wait. Why can't I share my screen? All right. I'm having a problem where when I switch to the tab for Zoom, I don't get anything. So I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong here.
Can you send it to Jackie?
Oh, look at this. Hold on. There we go.
Right window?
Well, it was somehow minimized. I work for a company that makes a product that competes with Zoom, so I have much less Zoom experience than a lot of people.
So that was a design.
Something like that.
I work for
He
Google.
uses Google Meet.
So it's Google Meet all the time.
It's the thing that nobody uses.
Right. If you had somebody from Microsoft, I suspect they would be a wizard. They would be a wizard. Yes. But if you had someone from Microsoft, they would be much more adept at Teams than Zoom as well, I expect.
All right, shared in any event.
Yes. All right. So there we go. So this isn't quite in order because we had some, other suggestions that Emily or I followed up on, like the financial considerations. It's on the list already, the long-term one. Economic development outlook, what our prospects are for new growth. We've already reached out to Andrew, leaving Emily and I.
Would that include the Eastern Gateway, or is that not ready for any discussion?
I would expect Andrew to discuss it if it's ready for discussion, and not if it's not.
We gave him a lot of latitude.
Yes. Yeah. And then there's a question about reaching out to the schools about there is we've already talked with school staff in this committee about the impact of federal events, where there isn't a lot of direct federal grants to running public schools, but there's an awful lot of state support, some of which is backed by federal money. So trying to understand what the potential impact of that is. We'd like to see more, learn more about that. I think, that's. Are there other?
To be clear,
Oh yeah.
just to be clear, this is just a brainstorm. So if you don't like, want your feedback on this.
Do we have a meeting before the financial forum? I think.
No, this is our last meeting before the financial forum.
So, you got enough bullets.
I mean, it's already a doozy of agenda. Oh, sorry, I didn't go back to the agenda, which is to have a discussion. And by the orders of suggestion, because we might want to have the budget guidance discussion last fall. But yes, also the CPA study committee has been doing presentations, and
you can expand that to fill the available time if you needed to.
I mean, that like many topics doesn't necessarily benefit from being talked about too much. Sometimes a shorter presentation is more effective for making a point. There is a
school committee options where how you were structuring override plus. I'm sorry, like how you were structuring override plus CPA. I listened to those school committee discussions, and that would be those concepts. I mean, I think would be worth getting broader exposure.
No, that's what Marianne is referring to, which didn't come up in the earlier CPA liaison report. Was so we did go to the school committee meeting, same one that Jeffrey reported on, and one of the we got a lot of good feedback and a lot of concern about how does this interplay with a possible future override. I think the biggest novel suggestion was trying to time it so that the two votes happen at the same time. So present it as a package deal, like your taxes are going up by, X percent, 1% of which is going to projects that will be, allocated under the Community Preservation Act, and will also receive state match under the Community Preservation Act. It's an interesting framing. I don't know if it's practically possible, given, we're not going to ask for an override before we need one. And, we don't know. Well, okay, Sharon might know, but the rest of us don't know. Matt might know too, and Jane. Staff might know, but we don't know. The committee doesn't know yet what, how our free cash regeneration is looking. No spoilers. But that is, any change in free cash regeneration could, move the timeline of a hypothetical override, significantly in one direction or another. But that was an interesting idea. So thank you, Marianne, for reminding me about that.
I just think it
should just get more public exposure because probably a lot of people didn't tune in. So maybe the select board would want to know, say.
No, fair enough. Yeah, no, I think, in general, the financial forum is good for stuff that we talk about that we want, more people to know. Actually, one question is, do we want to summarize the takeaways from this meeting at that one, given that more people watch that one? I don't know if I necessarily want to, but I'll put that out there as a question. I don't know how to use Zoom. I can't find the participant list again now. What's hilarious about this? All right, I'm going to stop sharing so I have the Zoom controls back. Are there other things that we should be thinking about in the agenda for the financial forum? Yeah, no, the CPA update should be short. We kept it, school committee wanted us to keep it under 10 minutes. I think we managed. I think it might be longer with this group because we have a more varying set of interests. But.
So I'll give you a preview of my question that I'm going to ask, and it's the one I asked every time CPA comes up and overrides, and I think I hope you'll have the answer, which is the percentage of CPA based on household taxes that include what we're paying towards debt exclusions or just on real estate taxes? What's the 1% calculated on? I remember asking that the very first time it came up, and Fidel didn't know the answer, and I don't know if you know the answer yet now.
I don't think that the answer to that is part of, no, I totally know the answer. Okay. The topic's not on the agenda, so ask me after we adjourn, and I won't give it a no.
No, I just mean to discuss the answer to that question in the financial forum, because I'm going to ask it.
Okay, sure. No, good news though. This has come up. I think because of you asking about it, actually. So, thank you, Mark.
Maybe another topic it did come up earlier. Sharon, maybe I know you talked about borrowing for the school and the senior center kind of in tranches. Mm-hmm. Maybe a projection of when you see those borrowings happen, because that will impact people's taxes. So I think people might have a perception their taxes are going up like in 27, but they probably aren't going up fully then. So it might be good to see when you think those will be coming.
So we will be borrowing in January for Killam and Recal, and probably the following year we'll borrow in February. So there will be 2 tranches at least, depending on how the cash flows look. But I was looking at least two, and you won't see any debt exclusion on fiscal 26. We didn't issue anything in time for that. So we're issuing in January to avoid any debt, exclusion on the fiscal 26 bill to give people a little reprieve. So the first debt exclusion is going to show up in fiscal 27, and then you'll see something more in 28. So it is going to come on kind of gradual.
Yeah, it'd be good to see that though, because I don't think
it's going to be on the debt schedule that goes into the town warrant. You'll see my projections of what those amounts might be. I asked Hilltop Securities to give me some estimates based on the cash flows, what I think we're going to borrow in January, and when I think we'll borrow the second round. And I got them to, price those out for us, and I put those all on my debt spreadsheet. So they will be there for you to see. Right now, I'm leaning towards 2 tranches just because debt is so expensive to issue. But we only have so much time to spend the money. So we do have to be very careful of how much we borrow. We can't borrow too much. And so, yeah, right now I'm leaning towards 2, but that doesn't mean that it won't change depending on what's going on with the project. And because we do have to be looking at the cash flow. If the cash flow changes, it could speed up our need to borrow. So that's the sort of thing I'll be looking at.
Is it a good topic for the financial forum?
Oh, I think so. And I was going to just add to what Mark said. I think this might be a small thing to someone if literally an accountant, but to translate the amount of new debt into, and this is probably just a matter of division, as to what percentage increase is that on our property taxes that year.
Oh, you mean in terms of what I plan to borrow and what that would
right,
be?
exactly. Because if you borrow, we projected that, and again, I don't remember these numbers off the top of my head, but if my
X $100 per $100,000 of house value.
That would be nice.
So we said that's what the whole projects would be.
Right.
The whole projects would be
But
certain
how much to
amount per
expect
100, but how much are we actually?
Exactly. That's the
How much will hit
It'll
fiscal
go up this
27?
much the first tranche and then the rest the next tranche.
Yeah, that's the information that at the end of the day, I think a lot of residents will want to see.
So normally during a financial forum, that first forum, we usually talk about projected revenues, projected accommodated cost. Debt is an accommodated cost, so it would have been on the financial forum anyway, but I can definitely make sure that I have that information for you as well.
Cool. John.
Sharon, on the topic of projections, how big of a lift would it be to go back to like past years and get a sense of however many years out from those projections are, how big of a range the actual numbers come in at? Like, so if when you're projecting 3 years out, how close are those projections to the actual numbers that come in 3 years later? And like,
what numbers are we speaking of?
Like revenues.
Are you talking about revenues, or are we
accommodated costs,
talking
I guess like all like the big categories.
I mean, how far back would you want me to go?
I don't know.
I mean, I do maintain a schedule for that stuff for myself for when I'm doing the budgeting, so it wouldn't be a terrible heavy lift, depending on what you want me to
But
look
like
at.
we said, for the last 10 years, the 3-year projections are usually within this range of what they turn out to be 3 years later. Than maybe the 2-year and the 1-year projections, as we see like how.
Well,
trying to think how I'd present it though.
Yeah, I mean, it would be I think I understand what you're saying, John. It would be cool. I have actually tried to do this before, where I pull up the warrant report for 2 subsequent years. I'd be like, okay, what did it say FY25 was going to be in 23? What did it say FY25 was going to be in 24?
I mean, I could,
and
I guess the more years I show you, the more confusing whatever I show you.
I know, right? Like it's I could explain that, like, this is easy to explain if you
just
look
trying to
at
figure out
one
how I
isolation.
present
That's not
that.
very. It's an interesting question.
I could certainly show you
10 years
what
later.
fiscal 25 was,
Plus
like
for
what the actuals were compared to the budget. I mean, because actually I do already give you some of that, because when I talk about free cash regeneration, I'll tell you this is how much above the budget, excise tax came in, or property tax came in, or meals tax, or anything that's regenerating free cash for revenue is basically because we received more money than I projected that we would. So you do kind of get that information every year, but just for that 1 year. You're saying you want it for several years, right?
Like over these 10 years, the projections came in plus or minus 5% or plus or minus 20% or whatever.
I mean, just in total or individually?
Go ahead, Mark.
I think though, if this is a little bit of a rat's hole, I think, because if you went back like 5 years ago and said 5 years out, where would free cash be? I think the projections would be that, right now we're a lot higher than where those projections would be. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what would, this could be more confusing. And it could be where like, all right, do I not trust any of your forecasts anymore? because, because it's so far off.
I have a different way of framing the same thing though, which might be where John was going with this in the first place. He's smiling because I think I may have it. We, by which I mean Sharon and Matt, budget famously conservatively, and we always end up having a fair amount of free cash regeneration, and it is. I mean, the thing is, I guess there's sort of more than one way to look at the same thing. One way we look at this every time, because every time we do a free cash projection, we're making an estimate of regeneration in future years, which is or is not based on, sometimes we've been like, oh, 2 million flat or 3 million flat. And sometimes, other than people like me come along and make it complicated, be like, I'd like to do 70% of the 10-year average, whatever. You can make this as complicated as you want. But the point is that you are capturing historical information about how much better off we turned out to be. That gap that Mark alluded to, where we are better off than it looked like we were going to be based on our intentionally conservative projections several years ago.
I mean, if you ask me about free cash, I always give you the lowest regeneration number that we use, so like whenever I'm showing you a chart of free cash, I'm saying, okay, well, 3 million is the baseline that I almost always see. $3 million is a low number for us. Yeah. So I could put 3 million in there and it's still conservative because we've seen much higher numbers in many, many years. Although I'd say this year is probably going to be a different year. I mean, I think we're closer to the $4.5 million regeneration number, which is really not helpful. So, but that's preliminary. I haven't really dug deep into the numbers yet, but it doesn't look like as big of a year as like last year or the year before. But generally, the whole time I've been here, $3 million has been somewhat of a safe regeneration based on our style of budgeting. So I would say that that's why I always kind of try to yield towards a $3 million or less number when I'm showing you those projections and those charts related to free cash, because I view that as a safe number.
Right. But I guess I would be interested to know, like, if we always project 3 million, but the numbers that actually come in are on average 3.5 million, or, the highest they've been is 4, like, maybe not asking for like the actual numbers, but like percentage wise, like we project 3 million and on average it comes in 5% higher than that. Or the ranges betwing 3% and 10% higher. Or
just trying to, I don't know if there's consistency from year to year.
So yeah, I mean
I'm looking for the variance.
I'm 100%.
Yeah, I'm debating whether I want to make this comment or whether we're getting into the discussion of free cash projections and going off topic from future agendas. Maybe I'll cut myself off, even though I have thoughts on why past performance may not be a guarantee of future results, and there may be good reasons why that's the case I can think of. Or you can ask me outside of the meeting, and we talk about whatever we want.
Definitely, just the economy in general is a different space than it was in the past. Just inflation has hit our budget hard, so you're going to naturally see less money being turned back in the expense area for sure. So
it's an outlier too.
Well, yeah,
we do tend to regenerate a lot from open positions. The time frame that we go without a position while we're trying to hire it tends to yield a fair amount of free cash regeneration as well. So I'm trying to think of a way to provide what you're looking for and not confuse people.
I mean, a contrast between the projected free cash regeneration and the historical free cash regeneration might be a simple way to boil down what John's asking, if I understand correctly. But which is not the same thing as saying that we should use the historical as the projection, because I don't think we should. But go ahead, Mark.
Well, I think the other big thing is interest on free cash. It's been such a high number, and I think you budget pretty conservatively there. But at some point, when free cash drops, that's going to drop the interest. So it's like we're at some point going to see that. So it's a little bit of a trap.
And that's kind of the reason we have to be conservative with the investment income, is just interest rates fall, they don't stay high, and so you have to be conservative. You can't be relying on that kind of money every year, so we try and keep that number. A lot of the regeneration you see on the revenue side is coming from investment revenue, because over the last few years, it's been much higher than we've seen, and we don't know how long we can expect that, so.
Other comments on future agendas? We're going to have a meeting after financial forum, and we go over the warrant and vote on financial articles. I think the agenda there is probably self-explanatory, unless something comes up that town staff needs us to weigh in or something. All right, let's move on to the approving the minutes.
I did have one comment. The original packet for that meeting had had some dates after our names, and dates after my name were incorrect. I see that in the minutes here, I think it was the third number was the date at which our 9 years were up, and that was just stricken out entirely. So now it's only the years for our current term. So I don't know.
Oh, you mean on the what?
Yeah, in the liaison assignments in the packet, which is strictly, well, I don't know if it counts as part of the minutes or not. I'm guessing it's not, but it's in the packet after the minutes, so it's close enough.
Do you mean, Jeff, like when's our last term on FinCom, like when we started and then? Yeah,
that meeting had other dates in it, and mine didn't make sense.
And it used to be online too, or maybe it still is.
Yeah, so I could check. I don't know. Is that Jackie? You were going to maybe talk with Laura Jim about that and straighten some of the dates out, and I guess did you decide to just strike it entirely?
We moved it until I could get clarification from Laura.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, I'm looking at the website, which
so there was a third.
Doesn't look wrong. Yeah, no, the liaison reports did have this sort of arguably extraneous information about when we all term limit out, and the website does have this information in terms of member since. So, though actually that's a little bit tricky. Like I'm going to term limit out.
You have to add 9 to it.
Or 8 if you, or 7. Well, it's depending on, no, if you're 7, you're actually eligible. You could go for 10 years. It's if you're, if you had a 2-year term, as I did, then I'm only, you all will be rid of me after 8.
Because you can't serve half, you can't go on and serve half a term.
Yeah, well, I think it says if it's more than a year, there's a cutoff that I'm on the far side of, where it counts as a full term for term limit purposes. It's in the charter.
Yeah.
So, but anyway.
We're the only board with this limit too, right?
I don't know. Take it up with the charter review committee. All right. So, all right. Any more, back on the topic of the minutes, any other?
Motion to approve the August minutes as presented.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Andrew. Any further discussion before we vote? All right, we are still hybrid, so with Ed?
Yes.
Joe McDonough?
Abstain.
Jeffrey?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
Emily? Marianne?
Yes.
And Joe, yes. So we had 1 abstention, everyone else in favor.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Second.
Ed, we're voting.
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Jeffrey?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
Emily?
Yep.
Marianne?
Yes.
And Joe, yes. And that got us under the wire, 8:59 p.m. We did not go tonight. Good job, everyone.